Alright, so today we got our walkthrough of the Ecoboost swap. So let's get right into the engine bay here and I'll show you what's going on. So, engine is factory. I used as much of the factory equipment as possible, like the airbox and the fuse box, factory ECU, and then there's some bits and bobs in between that are custom. So here we have the power steering pump reservoir that feeds the aftermarket power steering pump bracket that I am running. I'm not going to say who just yet since I'm still working out some kinks, but so far so good. I've gotten a few drives in and seems to be working alright. All the other front end accessories are factory. The high pressure fuel pump under the filter there is fed by the fuel pressure regulator, which I mounted to my firewall. That's fed by a much larger pump in the factory pickup and tank. You can see some mess over here. So off the back of the engine is the feed for your heater core. I've tapped into that with the sensor for my dash and coolant temp, and then the thing next to it is the mess of AC stuff that I'm still debugging at this point. I haven't quite triggered yet. And then over here, this gray box here is my secret sauce. This is the thing that communicates with the new engine control over CAN bus and controls some of the old things. So this does reverse lamps, fuel pump, priming and running, tachometer, and then eventually AC again once I figure it out. That's one of the things I'm trying to figure out is all the signals. And then as we move down, obviously there's the factory Ecoboost radiator, and then an aftermarket cooler for the transmission, and a condenser for AC. And then as we move down, you can see through the bumper here, that's an Ecoboost intercooler from a 2017. It's much shorter in height, so it fit much better. It didn't reach up into the rest of the core support area. And then as we move underneath, there's the rest of my coolers. So I replaced the factory power steering cooling lines with one of the cylinders. Seems to work great, stays nice and cool. And then for the oil filter, had to remote mount it. So this is also a bit of a concoction. So it's a remote mount kit. You can see the adapter on the engine there, since Ecoboost comes straight out instead of down through the hole. Come to this adapter here, and it runs the factory Ecoboost oil cooler and a factory oil filter. The only other concoction down here is the this jumper tube here for the intercooler piping. The way this ends up mounting is a little bit farther forward than the 2014 tubes can fit, so I had to do a little bit of a jumper tube myself with some pie cuts. It's not pretty, but it functions great. After rolling through under the diff here, we get into the shifter bracket. This is the factory shifter cable for the E4OD, custom link bracket and custom mounting bracket. Wasn't too hard to make. The dimensions are pretty easy. The shifting positions line up very nicely on the shifter. The only drawback is I cannot get to manual first on the 6R80, since the shifter doesn't have enough positions and doesn't go as far enough back. Power or the transmission cooler. The rest of the system is factory, so these are the factory Ecoboost lines that run nicely under the engine. If we try and follow them along here, up over the cross member. The exhaust, factory mount to the turbo, cut off right after the O2 sensor, right before the cats. And then the rest of the tubing is just steel for the time being, to mainly to try it out. I wasn't sure how well this would work. Kind of funny how it runs between transmission and drive shaft, up underneath the transfer case. It doesn't seem to get too hot, which is nice. That runs over and meets the one from the other side to a Y pipe. Y pipe to resonator to MagnaFlow Super 10 in the axle over, and then finally there's a resonator out back just to take off a little noise while cruising. Overall, though, I really like how it sounds. When it comes to the interior, I tried to keep the dash stock, so you can see all the factory gauges. I did do an LED bulb swap on everything, which is has some of its own issues. For example, you'll see here the check engine light is dimly lit while running, but works correctly with the new control box. You can also see over here next to the electronic transfer case controls, I've added the manual shift buttons. So when I put the shifter in 2, that's the manual shift mode, and then I have my up and down shifts on the 6R80. And then some of the other upgrades I did while running all of this was new head units, better speakers, remote keyless entry, things like that. Just some convenience options. So you can see when I key on, my control box does a few things. It primes the engine, sweeps the tach, checks the check engine light much like the factory ECU would, and then it's ready to fire. So let's give her a crank. So this is the exhaust noise from inside the cab. And then let's get one from the outside. So that's been the run through of the Ecoboost Swap Bronco, and I'm gonna go have some fun and drive it.